Welcome to Do It for the Gram and Enneagram podcast with your host, certified Enneagram coach Milton Stewart, where we do it for the Enneagram, not Instagram. We make moves to improve our lives and those in our community. Happy New Year if this is your first episode listening for Type 3s. I'm super excited to be here, and we are talking about arrow lines. So let's go intro. Finding help for your mental and emotional struggles can be challenging. With so many barriers like cost, and even feeling safe looking for a counselor can be tricky, so I know it's hard. And the worst part is you really don't have the time or mental space to be trying to figure out how to find a counselor when you're having personal struggles. So thanks to BetterHelp, they are built on making counseling accessible, affordable, convenient, so that anyone who's having struggles in their life can actually get the help they need at any time and anywhere, which is so important, especially now. All the professionals are licensed, trained, experienced, and accredited. And what I love so much about them is that they have a diverse group of counselors with a broad and various amounts of different backgrounds to help all their different clients. If you need some help, try BetterHelp. You can get a 10% off discount from your first month when you go to betterhelp.com/doit. That's BetterHelp.com/DOIT. All right, so the Enneagram Arrows, what are these things, okay? So the Enneagram symbol in itself has deep wisdom, deep knowledge, and a ton of information. We're not going to go over all of that in this episode clearly, because you can go on for days with that information. But we are focused on the arrows because the arrows actually have a lot of information, especially for where it's connected to on the Enneagram to the different types that it's connected to. It means a lot, right? And so we're talking about qualities or things that this type may be missing and need to maybe work to cultivate inside of themselves. Some of the old terminology you may have heard for arrows is integration and disintegration. And those terms are used by some still, no doubt, and depending where you learn Enneagram from. But a lot of people in the now current time kind of don't use those two phrases. One, because disintegration just sounds weird. If you're like, man, I'm disintegrating, oh, you are? I don't see it, but that's kind of strange. So they've kind of switched it, and the terminology is used a little bit different now as well. So now you may have heard of stress and security arrows. And yes, those are good. Those are great. And we're still using them, right? But when you think of stress and security, I want you to think of ego stress. I want you to think of ego security, right? So we're talking about stress to the personality type or the ego of the three, or insecurity to the type 3 personality or ego, right? So we want to think about it from that phrase. And I'm also going to add two more phrases in a moment that Beatrice and Uranio Pius got quite a bit of this. They've kind of worked on this information and discovered quite a bit of it. So that's Beatrice and Uranio from CP Enneagram. Let's talk about these arrows. So the arrows, the direction of them actually do matter. If you look at an Enneagram symbol, somebody's logo, my logo, for instance, one of my logos, you're probably not going to see the arrows. You're just going to see lines. But there's actually arrows within them. And the arrows actually really mean something. And the direction even matters. The type 3 has one arrow pointing towards the type 9 if you look at the Enneagram symbol, right? And then the type 3 has the other pointing towards it from the type 6. So the other arrow is actually pointing towards it from the type 6. Now, going with the arrow, because I'm going to use this terminology a little bit, going to help you out. Going with the arrow would be considered going towards the type 9, right? Because there's an arrow from the 3 going to the 9. And then going against the arrow is going to be considered the 3 going towards the type 6 because we're going against the arrow that's pointing towards it. Type 3, going with the arrow is considered the stress point for type 9 on the lower side. So it's going to be considered the stress point, ego stress going towards the type 9, and that's on the lower side. On the higher side, going towards the type 9 is considered the resolution arrow. And we'll get to what resolution means, right? But it's the resolution arrow. It's going to make sense. And then type 3 going against the arrow, which is considered the security point for type 3, is going towards the 6. So the security point or security arrow for the type 3 is type 6. And this is on the lower side, okay? It's called the security one. On the higher side, the type 6 for the type 3 is considered the energizing arrow. And we'll get to that in a second, and it'll make sense why it's called that as well. In growth, there is a focus of moving against the arrow first, then moving with the arrow. So for the type 3, that would be moving towards the 6 arrow first, doing work there, then moving towards the 9 arrow, okay? So just letting you know before we jump in. All right, so why are these lines important? Well, you don't want to be stuck in your number. And then there's so much work to be done, and the arrow lines help us to get specific information of things that we need to maybe work on and cultivate inside of ourselves so our egos aren't gripping us so strongly. And this is very important for type 3s because type 3s, a lot of times, because our society is kind of built in type 3-ish ways, especially in westernized society, but especially in America to a certain degree, that 3s, 7s, and 8s are able to kind of get away with more of their personality quirks or things they need to work on because they look quote unquote okay or good in society on the outside. And so 3s, 7s, and 8s can be operating at a very low level, but be getting away with it because our society unfortunately values some things in us that may not be healthy for us actually. It's very important for 3s to be serious about the work that they're doing because our society can kind of like say, oh no, it's fine. And 3s, 7s, and 8s, and especially 3s can put on a good image for people. They can say, oh, I'm fine, I'm looking good. I achieved something. But there's some deep things that we are not actually working on or paying attention to. All right, so let's jump into the specific arrow. So on the lower side, the unconscious movement, right? Unconscious movement basically means unawareness, right? You're just not aware of what's happening. You're just reacting. Your ego structure is running the show. So on the lower side, 3s moving to the 6 in security become fearful, paranoid, and even hesitant. They overanalyze and their anxiety rises to a level where it's actually externally noticeable. They also tend to isolate themselves because they feel vulnerable. So this is really tricky, right? Because this is not a 3's normal way of operating. They're usually a little bit out there. People are going to see them. They know how to make themselves look good, know how to manage the image pretty well. And so they usually aren't operating with like a fearful, paranoid, or even hesitant type of thing. When the ego is feeling insecure and the 3 has moved to the lower side of the 6, now you have someone who's a little paranoid about different things going on. The fear is rising. They feel the deep anxiety in their bodies and they hesitate to make choices instead of being like before, like, yeah, I'm sure I'm going to do that. Let's do this. Move forward, okay? Or like a few moments of thinking about it, then making a decision. Not really clear, not really decisive. Usually they're a little bit decisive on what they're going to do. And even though 3s usually have anxiety and people just don't see it because they manage it very well, it actually starts to come out here when this happens and people start to really notice it. And so this makes them want to kind of hide, right? Because the image is very important to the type 3. So this is an insecurity within the ego of the type 3 and unconscious movement to the 6 arrow. Now, on the lower side, an unconscious movement of unawareness, 3s moving to the 9 arrow in stress, they can actually become scattered, worn down, zoned out, and overworking for others. And they lose focus and avoid necessary conflict that they need to have. Because usually 3s don't mind a little bit of conflict if it's going to help them achieve or help them get to something that they want out of something or a goal. It's fine. But in this space, when on the lower side of the 9, they don't want to necessarily engage that, right? Because there is a stress on the ego that is worn them down so much that now they're even scattered mentally. They're not like clear and efficient like they would like to be. And now they're also zoned out from what's really going on. And it's a big part of it because they've been doing so much work for so many other people or trying to get the approval, gain approval from certain other people externally that they have totally forgotten to really check in with themselves and to really know what's going on and figure out what they really want to do. So they're lost in things for other people and they're also not focused really that much anymore and they're very, very scattered. So they have to be aware of that and be careful. On the higher side, and if you're looking at the conscious movement, this is higher levels of awareness, right? This is when now you're paying more attention. It's not reactionary per se. It is more like you're actually responding. This is important. So sometimes the environment can actually create a way that we actually move into the arrows in a healthy way. But what we want to do is cultivate the the internal space and the internal energy and focus where we can do it ourselves despite what's going on externally. And this is very important for threes. Once again, being an outward facing type like twos and fours, you have to make sure you're managing what's going on inside, because outside you're going to most likely still look good and people will give you compliments, and you may know in your heart of hearts that you got a lot to work on, and that's not maybe what's really happening. It's just what they see. On the higher side, threes moving to the 6th arrow as the energizing point, which means they get the right energy, right? This is the higher side of the 6. They get the right energy. Every type has their own type of energy they bring into a space and a place. And so in order to really get to our resolution point, we need the right type of energy, right? To balance out our energy. So for threes, moving to the 6th arrow gives them the right energy, and it helps them to be more introspective and question themselves in healthy ways for the things they really want out of life. They understand their true fears more, they're more honest, and they value teamwork much more. So this is important. These are things on the high side of 6 which they love. You talk about good teamwork, they love to be a part of a support system that really works really well. You're talking about being like true, really honest about maybe what they see or what they think. 6s have that ability to be able to do that. And you talk about actually knowing what your fears are and not just pretending like it's not that or avoiding it or changing it to something else or making it look good. No, they're realistic about them, and so they can actually do something about them, work through them, learn about them. All these different things are so important. And so for threes to get their right energy, they can question what things they really want out of life in a healthy way. So they move forward in a way that is healthier and maintains a balance of what's going on inside of them as well. Now, threes moving to the 9 to the resolution point, because now you're moving with the arrow. You moved against the arrow to the type 6 to get that right energy. Now you're moving towards the 9 arrow to get that resolution point. And so now they're actually able to relax without pressure. Okay, a lot of times, it's hard to relax for threes, and there can sometimes feel like a pressure that you're wasting time or that you have something else you have to do or you need to be doing something, or, maybe this is laziness and all this. No. When they're moved to the resolution point, because you got the right energy of checking in with yourself, right? You can actually relax without that pressure of having to always feel like you need to be doing something. And then it gives you the ability to slow down and have patience and just be, right? You not just do, but just be. And so here's some practical things that come to mind for me when I think about what threes could do in a way to help them. One thing threes could do, and you have to maybe pay attention to a high functioning or a high awareness 6, right? What are some things they do? One thing for a 3 that they could do is literally take time to give themselves questions, maybe in the morning or the afternoon, to check in with themselves. Not just what goals and what part of the goal have I knocked out or accomplished or what's next type of deal, but actually looking at questions that question their own motives, what they truly want, which is a heart level thing, what do they truly desire, and maybe even what things am I just doing for other people, or what things am I just doing for accolades or accomplishments, but not really something that I, in my heart of hearts, really want to do, right? So asking yourselves really deep questions and taking time to be introspective. That's one of the things that's hard for a lot of threes I see as well, is that they don't take a lot of time to be introspective, right? They're moving so fast, they're doing so much that even Enneagram work can be hard for threes, right? So I applaud you if you're listening here and you're a 3, because a lot of times threes don't always show up because looking inside is kind of scary for threes a lot of times. To really notice, to really work with, it can be scary, especially when they're first trying to get there, because a lot of it has been convoluted by being the role or the image that someone else that they want approval from is on them. So they have to wade through those things and figure out who in the world am I really. So applaud you for being here, but now it's time to get to work. So really going inside and really working with, okay, what is actually in there, and asking yourself some deep questions and maybe even writing it out, checking in with those things. Those things can be monumental for threes to actually do to get that kind of their right energy. So those things are really helpful. And then asking yourself, what do I fear? And not just what you're afraid of. There's a difference. Like I think we think of fear sometimes, especially I would say in Western society and culture, that fear is this bad thing and it means you're weak and all this junk. No. Fear is a survival instinct. And in the wild, if you don't have a good fear instinct, you're probably not going to survive. And so what things inside of you are you actually fearful of that you maybe need to work through over time? Maybe bring in a coach, maybe bring in a therapist. What things you need to be able to do to actually work with those things? So really taking time to be introspective on those parts of yourself are monumental to helping you develop that right energy to really figure out what's going on and just figuring out what you really want out of life. Then the next thing, some practical things to move into the type 9, once you've really taken time to really deep dive into yourself, is really figuring out what are some things things you can do that allow you to relax, okay? That allow you to be? What are some fun or just peaceful things you can do that allow you to be and to relax? So it may be getting a massage. It may be doing something like that because it allows you to slow down, to get in your body, and to really take time just to make sure that you're okay, right? So it's going to be very important that you find different ways that you can say, okay, now I can slow down, right? Or what is something you can do to slow down? You can meditative eat, which is a little hard. Maybe you can meditative walk, walking slowly, right? Mindfulness walking. These things are a little bit hard when you're first starting out, but as you practice them and you really check in with yourself, you will see that they actually have major benefits for you internally. Less pressure, less stress, all these things. It's so much it provides you with. And you pay attention maybe to your body more, maybe even to your friends and family more than you did beforehand, right? And so these things are very important to note. That's all I have for the type 3 on this episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you're a 3, keep doing that work. If you see the ego structure flaring up to try to make yourself be impressive, remember, when you stop trying to be impressive, you will truly be impressive because you're naturally amazing in the way that you are. Not the things you just do, but the way that you are and who you are. Just want to throw that in there for sure for type 3s. KCEP, the cohort number 4 is starting in August. If you want to attend, signups are there. I'll put the notes in the show note, but it's the Kaizen Complete Enneagram Program, and that's kaizen-enneagram-community.mn.co, which that's Mighty Networks. Only 16 people, so if you want to go ahead and sign up, you're welcome to sign up for that. It'll be in the show notes, and you can go there. So for type 3s, if you feel your ego about to flare up and you feel like you're finna do something super impressive just to impress certain people, take a deep breath, breathe, and make a smarter choice and a healthy choice for you. And do it for the gram, the Enneagram, of course. And I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.